Yeah. It's like the old when you're hiring, you like hire somebody who can do your job. Eventually you can train them to do your job better than you do it. Like you're hiring your replacement and training your replacement so that you can be replaced. And that's like a difficult thing to like wrap your brain around. Obviously, raising kids is not like hiring people. You don't, but the idea
No,
of,
totally.
yeah, the
I get
idea of
what you
like,
mean.
yeah, I wonder about, this idea of like, your kids are a reflection of you in a lot of ways, and you are a reflection of your parents in a lot of ways, and there's some like editing of the experience that you had growing up with your parents that you kind of pass on to your kids, right? You kind of choose, all right, I'm going to definitely highlight this was something that I really loved and something I really appreciated, and I'm going to try and pass this on. And then there's like things that you're like, this wasn't it. I'm going to leave this one on the cutting room floor. They're not going to be exposed to this, And I think that type of a process also happens in like really sharp relief once you first become a parent. Like you don't really think about that. At least I didn't really think about that until I became a dad, and I was like, oh wow, like, my relationship with my dad suddenly becomes a lot more clear. Like my failings as a son, it becomes significantly more clear when I had a son. And someone told me, you don't know how to be a child until you become a parent. You don't know how to be a parent until you become a grandparent. And I was like, uh, that's a little too heavy for me, man. I can't. I can't.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because you live in that mindset too much, and it's like, oh, well, it's all gloom and doom, and it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I guess so. Like, it's all revisionist history, and we all want to go back and blah 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 blah. But um, yeah, totally, I think there's so much muscle memory, and you can't help but do something based on your summary of experiences, right? When you go into any experience, you are bringing this collective. And anytime you need to kind of change the perspective or change the action, you have to have something overt and intentional to like kind of shake the principle for a second. And so I think, so my wife and I have been married 10 years this past May. And I
Congratulations.
can assure you, 10 years in, that we are still wildly figuring things out on how to communicate, how to live life. Because, like I said, life is dynamic and changing. And I feel like it's taken up until now for us to actually get better at talking about how we feel in the life we want. We just moved into a new home, and we kind of used it as a way to say, hey, what's some of the intention we want to put into this house, so that we can both be on the same page for like what type of home are we creating. Because living in our house during the pandemic, we realized, one, like we wanted a slightly different house. There was a few things that we didn't like and liked, but our home became really important. We were all home, arguably like everyone else. We went on walks and went to the grocery store, but there was a time where we were together. And so we're like, how can we better drive some small things? And so like a really simple thing was, in our new living floor, we've got kind of a living room, dining room, kitchen that are all connected. And we were like, we do not want to put a TV this time around in the living room. So we've got it up in the loft, like, and you got to go up there to do it. And it's kind of separated. And we've already noticed a difference. Our kids aren't asking to watch movies. We're actually having meals as a family. We are playing together. Our kids are doing arts and crafts instead of like, all these things, and like these small moments of intention that are aligned between you and your partner, I think are really important, because you're both kind of in it, if that makes sense. And you're both excited about what the net result could be. And if you're both on the same page, you can kind of manifest that in as well. And so we put a piece of art up over our fireplace instead of a TV, and it was intentional. And we're starting to find these other little moments of saying like, hey, this house is a transition for us. What can we further do to manifest the life that we say we want to have? And so there's more focus on, health. I'm building out a cool gym. Just a side note, sweet gym, the best gym I'll have ever had at my house.
Yes.
Other than like half of a 2-car garage, it's actually going to be built out in my new basement. And so like stuff like that, we are really investing into what we consider to be the best return on our future selves. I'm really jockeying for a sauna right now. For all those listening, we're currently in a sauna hot tub debate. I'm losing ground rapidly. with all of our friend groups, every poll I put up, I'm just getting buried. So I might have to just concede, but I really want a sauna as well. I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah, we moved when we moved from Austin out here to LA, it was a little bit more hectic. We didn't really get the opportunity to do like a state of the union and figure out where we're at, because we were like, up until the moment or the truck pulled out, like my brother and I drove the truck, my wife and her mom drove the dogs in our car. So it's like we were, up until the moment the truck like reversed out of the driveway of our house in Austin, we were still packing things. Like it was chaos. It was just the worst possible way of doing that. So we never really got an opportunity to do like the State of the Union thing. And uh I think that is something that is valuable, because it gives you, even if you just take a minute to like reflect, think through it, and just communicate with your partner, hey, are our priorities still aligned in this specific case? Are we moving in the right direction in this specific case? Because sometimes you're naturally, because you get to know your partners so well over time, and you guys kind of grow up together. At a certain point, you reach a tipping point in which you've spent more time together than you had apart, and your character and your values really start reflecting that time spent.
Mhm.
You kind of subconsciously end up going in the right direction, as long as you picked a partner that you're kind of aligned with. You kind of subconsciously start going in the right direction. I think it's important to have those overt conversations as well, and say, hey, you know what, do we really want to invest our time in X, Y, and Z? Do we really want to spend our budgeting in our money like in these things? Do we want to focus on this instead of that? Right? Do we want to homeschool instead of this, instead of public school, private school? The whole schooling thing, teaching. What values do I want to pass on to my kids? And a lot of that also comes down to like, this is coming to sharp relief for me as well. Again, 3-month old, he's not really consciously picking up a ton about my behavior and habits, but he definitely learns a lot from watching, because he's not really, it's not like I could tell him, son, this is how you do this. Like he looks at me and sees me do things, and that's never going to change. He's always going
Well,
to see me.
yeah, there's nothing quite so uninvited to your children as a lecture from dad on how to live life rather than just living life,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that's so true. Like the fact that you have to live the example, it's very much like, I think kids, and looking back at like my own experience growing up, I definitely, understood this under the subconscious. Is I learned from my dad with the lessons that he taught me, by telling me, hey, this is why I did this, or this is why you should think about this, or how you should move along here. But a lot of it also came from seeing how he behaved, how he interacted with my mom, how he interacted with my brothers, how he carried himself with his friends, with his business. So much of that is like, almost like you just marinate in that without knowing that that's happening in the moment. And the fact that now
Yeah.
I'm responsible for creating that environment and that space and that modeling for my own son, that's a lot of responsibility. That's a lot of uh power in a way. I think power is a kind of it's a rough word for describing what it is, but it really is a lot of power. I can shape my son's future in a lot of ways just by the way that I behave. So do I want him to see me on my phone all the time? Do I want him to see me distracted with my wife? Do I want him to see me active and out there and participating in life and doing things? And there's a lot of these like questions that almost are like painful to answer, because it's you you know as a person, I've lived my life in a lot of different ways, and I can understand that some of those habits and some of those behaviors aren't necessarily things that I want to pass along. And it's that responsibility to like confront that can be painful.
Well, and to be honest, it requires a lot of personal growth from you to identify like the answer to those questions, because you can kind of give yourself the way out. A lot of times when it comes to introspection for yourself, it's really easy to um, parent these children because you have the authority to, and like change these little tweaks. But the reality is, unless you can identify that same need or change in yourself, it's very, very hard to perpetuate that down. So I don't know if there's some like actual number here, but like where you have insecurity, it's and you're talking about it actively with your kids instead of showing them, it's probably like going to take 5 times as long for that point to resonate if you just do it instead, right? Like me talking about all this stuff, me doing this. And so I'll have to come back and listen to the best version of myself on this episode too, because I'm a super dad right now. Everything that we're talking about is great, and like all this dialogue. I will say a resource that I constantly use. I love Stoic Principles, Stoic Thinkers, Meditations is a great book. I love a lot of what Ryan Holiday puts out. Daily Dad is an incredible email. If this group finds interest there, I subscribe to that, and it's a great little nugget on dads through history, dads through time, nuggets for dads, because sometimes you just need to know here's how someone else did it. And like there's a little bit of comfort in that, right? Because some of you might be really good at communicating with your local communities about being a dad, but uh, I like having some external resources. And one of the best quotes I constantly think of from meditation is, the nearer a man comes to a calm mind, the closer he is to strength. And so, not surrendering to anger. It's so easy. It's so cheap. It's such a short-sighted thing. I think it's really important to remember that you're playing the long game being a dad. You don't need to urgently fix everything today. You need to play the long game and give yourself a little bit of leeway on playing that long game. But if you are focused on just those little short exchanges, you're never going to kind of get, I think, to that long game if you're just trying to course correct, course correct, course correct. It's not how you do it. I think you got to have that long vision in mind so that you can actually index off something bigger than yourself and that's got a little bit more depth and breadth, so that that's where you can go instead of the complexity of pretending that you can move the world every day.
Yeah. Yeah. There's nothing quite like losing your cool, and in the exact moment you've lost your cool, realizing that not only was that ineffective, but it's just the worst possible way to react to something. Like last night, this is a perfect example. Lev had a real night last night. He's going through, he's hitting 3 months. He's hitting 3 months tomorrow. He's gonna be 3 months old tomorrow, and he's going through this like growth spurt where he really is, he's starting to like almost roll over. He's getting really active. When he's awake, and when he's sleeping. Like he's very, very much in the extremes right now. He's like discovering his voice, he's discovering his hands. It's a really, really fascinating time for him. And in the middle of the night, we he woke up, and I woke him up. I grabbed him and I was like, all right, I'm gonna try and get him to fall asleep. And he wasn't falling asleep. And I was getting frustrated. I was like, buddy, like it's 3 o'clock in the morning. You're like way too awake right now. You need to be asleep. This just is not working. And so I like put him in his pram and I walked him around the house. That didn't work. Like picked him up and I gave him his little like his little pacifier, and he like immediately spit it out and like it fell on the ground. And I was like, fuck. Like in the middle, it's like 3:30 in the morning. I was like, fuck. Like I just completely like went to like 100% of like just frustration for a second with him. And I looked down and he has this giant smile on his face, like ha 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 ha. And it was this moment of like, oh, that was so unnecessary. Like that was such an overreaction to this thing. And there's this like pain of like, oh, did I just like permanently damage my child by like losing my shit on him for a second? And then there's the realization of like, no, it's gonna be okay. Like he's fine, you're fine. Just try to be a little bit more like water, be a little bit more zen, be a little bit more calm when things like this happen, because it's going to happen a million times, and it's going to happen way more like way worse consequences and stakes than his pacifier falling on the ground. So it's just there's that idea of staying calm in order to be like the strongest and best version of yourself is definitely something that I'm very actively working on.
Well, there's so much emotion in this thing that we're doing as dads that there are going to be those flips. And what I've also, not to give myself an out, but I've also taken some slight comfort in, like, daddy gets upset too. Now, when you get upset in front of kids who understand what's going on, not a 3-month-old who thinks it's hilarious, by the way, you can't get upset and then leave. You can't get upset and go to another room and then like go get comfort on yourself. I think you have to get upset in like an honest way and be like, here's why I'm super pissed. And that is also very hard, because if you've already hit 100, you've already gone kind of a full psycho, right? Like, walking that back is very difficult. But I also think there's power in showing your kids that, like, because I don't know about you, but when my dad used to get upset, like it was kind of like, dad's upset and he's over there. We stay over here. We stay super quiet.
Yeah.
And then when dad comes out, you're like, what's the temperature check right now? Right. And so I think what I've had to realize in those moments is, like, I don't want my kids to ever be scared. Right. I want them to know that I can get upset, but then also getting upset is okay, because like you can't zen your life out to like remove the emotional roller coaster that is going to be happiness and anger, right? Like all of that has to exist for us to kind of experience everything that we enjoy. Because if if you put everyone on antidepressants, you don't have much going on, right? But you want a little bit of that, but you also, I think you have to experience that in a way that's okay, especially with your partner. Like, you have to be able to yell or get angry in a way that's actually productive, not just like, so the night's over.
Yeah.
Right? Like
Yeah.
you can't go draconian. And I'd love to say that I always have the opportunity to be like, I thought about it. I was being an asshole. I don't know my batting average is there, but it's definitely not enough to get to the World Series, or be a hitter of any type of recognition. So it's always a process.
Yeah. I think that there's a strength that comes from vulnerability. I think that's something that's generationally very different between us and our parents and our parents. There's this idea of openness and intimacy and vulnerability between parent and child, between partners, that just I really don't think existed 50 years ago or 100 years ago.
Oh, and the same thing we just talked about with seeking the best for our children. Like, when we talk about these kind of things, it shouldn't be a look how my parents messed up. It's, hey, take comfort in the fact that things are actually evolving, I think, in a directionally positive way, right? There's not these very traditional kind of setups where X person does this person does this, and there's really no blurring of the responsibility lines. It's become increasingly different. And I think that's a good thing. I think that's a testament to like things actually moving in the right direction.